All jumping on this morning. Today is September the 8th. Here we are. We're quickly approaching the fourth quarter, and hopefully, you're doing the things necessary to get your business in control and finish the year strong. This is the time to really be diving in and not letting up. Even if you've had a good year so far, um, this is the time to really start, gearing up for the end of the year. Because think about this, what you do today is most likely going to pay off in the first quarter of next year. So, you might be able to generate some business now that can close by the end of this year, but you always got to be thinking ahead and know that, the fourth quarter, especially, when the holidays start approaching and you start feeling like you just got too much on your plate. And so what usually gives? Well, your business, right? Because you got to tend to the family stuff, you got to tend to the parties, you got to tend to getting ready for the holidays. And so it's real easy to put off the business. But if you stay focused and you stay disciplined, you can do both. And just being able to do that during that fourth quarter is going to allow you to set up a really strong first and second quarter of next year. And that is so key. So many people, I've witnessed it. So many people just let up at the end of the year. They take their foot off the gas pedal and they're just like, I'm just going to go ahead and enjoy the holidays and have some fun. I don't have any business going on anyway right now. So let's go ahead and take a step back. So it's really important to focus. And we're going to do some things moving forward in the coming weeks that will help you hopefully to stay focused and disciplined in your business. But today I want to talk about some legal issues today because this has come up, and I know that this is like these things are really important. I'm going to start off with two easy ones before we dive into condos because condos can be a little complex. And I was hoping here he did respond to, he'd see us here this morning because I had a couple questions for him on the financing of condos. But that's okay. We can keep moving forward. So let's talk about solar panel pitfalls. All right. We know that we're dealing with solar panels. It's nothing new. This really started coming up a lot several years ago, as we started seeing, resales starting to pop up now with, solar panels on their roof, right? And the solar panel salespeople, they paint a really awesome picture, right? And you're going to save all this money, and you might even be able to sell some of the power back to the power company, and it's going to be worth your 40 or $50,000 investment because it's going to save you $200 a month, but you're going to pay $300 a month in paying those off, right? So it really it just I love the fact of solar. I think solar is a great way to get our energy, especially here in Florida with the sun. But at the same time, I just don't think the technology is there yet. And of course, attaching it to our roofs, creates a whole nother problem for us too. So um, the problem is with solar panels is they're generally leased and not owned. So it's for a lot of people, they just assume that you can not lease, right? No, what's the big deal? The buyer's going to get a mortgage on the house, and then they're going to have an extra payment on the solar panels. Well, there's several problems with that. Well, the buyer has to not only qualify for the mortgage on the house, they've got to qualify to assume that lease. So that means they've got to go through the whatever company is carrying the note on that on the solar panels, and get approved through there, which is not an automatic thing. They might just say, hey, no, the full amount is due at closing. We are not going to extend this. There might even be a clause in their contract. You never know, right? Um, but that buyer also has to go ahead and qualify for a mortgage for not only for the house, but include that payment that would be need to be made on those solar panels. So if they're making another, $300 a month payment on there, I mean, think about their debt to income ratios. And Brian, good to see you on here. Appreciate you jumping on. We're just because there was a couple things you might want to jump in. We're talking about solar panels right now, and one of the the issues is a buyer trying to assume a lease or a loan that's currently on those, and getting qualified for a mortgage plus that, right? So are you seeing issues with that in the marketplace, getting financing?
Good morning, guys. So there's been some issues only if it gets discovered later on. So luckily, we've been on the side where the buyer's agents are letting the buyers and or me know that there's solar panels in place, and that we do look at it whether it's leased or financed. And if it's leased, they have to take on that payment. We have to put it in the DTI. If it's financed, then it's up to whether or not the solar is going to be paid off. If it's paid off, then we don't care. But if
Yeah.
it's not going to be paid off, then yeah, 100%. It could completely change if they even qualify for the home. So yeah, we need to know up front. And luckily, we haven't had any issues yet.
Okay. Yeah, so what's happening too is that, if a buyer can't qualify and then the seller, is struggling to sell the home because they think that the solar panels, their $40,000 investment on the solar panels last year should increase their value $40,000, they're generally wrong. So now the seller needs to get out of their home, right? They bought the home a couple years ago. They need to get out for whatever reason. They're relocating. Maybe they lost a job. Maybe there's divorce. Whatever the case might be, and they're trying to get out from under this. What's starting to happen is that there's more and more short sales starting to show up. So you risk, going into a short sale or possibly foreclosure because that there's too much in the house. They can't get the value out of it, and something has to give, right? But the seller doesn't have the cash to pay off everything that's due, so they're stuck. They're either stuck to stay in the house and keep paying everything, or if they can't keep making those payments, they're just going to have to give up the house. And what happens there is that, well, if the bank takes it back, they're in first position, and so the solar company will, or whoever's financing the solar panels, will end up potentially with nothing. So, so yeah, so there's a lot of things there. So you have to really take a deep dive when you're taking a listing where you're showing a home to a buyer, and the home has solar panels. Do your homework, okay? Do your homework on behalf of the buyer or seller that you're working with, so that you can educate them, because they don't know. All they know is what they were told by the solar salesman, which is probably not quite 100% truthful, right? And so we have to be careful with that. It's not going to really help their appraisal. So I saw a question in the chat. Jeremy, you have any good stories from closings where the solar panels were included on a contract? Oh,
Okay.
you muted. You muted, Jeremy.
Kind of similar to Brian's. I mean, we typically need to know about it ahead of time to go ahead and line up and contact the solar company to make sure, everybody's in line, they've gotten approved. I just hear about it from like personal experiences from agents, where these sellers think that they're going to be adding value to their home, but since they're being financed, they don't. And the sellers just get really confused at, oh, well, I thought it was going to add all this value. And it's like, yeah, but they're still being financed. So no, they're not. That's kind of
Yeah.
what I hear most of the time.
Yeah, well, even if they aren't financing, where they invested their own money into it, it's not going to be worth that extra money. Mary, you had your hand up. Or you have a question?
Yeah, actually, at a rebar camp, I met an appraiser, and I actually asked her that question out of the blue. She was smoking a cigarette, and I was like, "Hey, I have a question." Um, I just wanted her perspective. I said, "Do you account for solar in any way when you're doing appraisals?" And she's like, "Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It does not go up or down in value at all." And I said, okay. I just keep asking the appraisers, and I'm getting the same answer most of the time.
Yeah, appraisers don't really like to add any value because of that, right? Because and it is a matter of opinion where the appraisers give their opinion of value. Now, I have seen appraisers actually, they might throw an extra 5 grand in there. It's not too different from swimming pools. You could spend 100 grand on putting in a new swimming pool, and the appraiser adds 20,000 to the value of the house, even though the pool is like a couple years old, and you just put all that money into it. But they just don't see it as a lot of value. But again, it's an opinion, and so you have to look at if you're on the buyer side and they give, actually, if you're on the seller side and you give a low valuation and not include everything, then you might need to request a different type of appraisal. But you really need to be careful if you're on a FHA or VA, because those appraisals will stick with the property for 6 months. Val?
Yeah, I had two comments. The first one is I think anyone getting solar needs to get an attorney to review those contracts before they sign them, because they're like borderline predatory lending in some cases. So, I mean,
Yeah.
you just have to be so careful. And secondly, I wanted to know what Elliot's opinion was on solar panels as an appraiser here on site.
Yeah, good question. Elliot.
Well, it's all situational. It's based on the market you're in, and you have to look at the data and find comparables that do have solar panels and do a paired sales analysis to determine if there is any value. You can't say whether it does or not. It's all dependent on the subject's market and what other homes are going for, and finding out if there is any sort of value given. Typically though, yeah, if they're leased, most lenders will say, and Brian will say this, most of the clients will say if it's leased, you're not even to include it in the report at all. So there's zero value there if they're leased. If they're owned, again, it's looking at sales that do have solar versus sales that don't, and determining if there is any sort of market reaction where there is an adjustment warranted.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, Elliot. Yeah, appreciate the input on that, because that makes total sense, right? And then the attorney asks an attorney that question, then they'll always come back with, well, it depends. So so you just have to be cognizant of it, and analyze it on a situation by situation basis, and then ask questions, dig deeper, because you don't want to have the problem when you're under contract. You want to resolve that problem before you would get far. So yeah, so be careful with solar panels. It's going to be, we're going to start seeing it even more. I mean, in the last 10 years, more homes were getting these panels put in, and so now those will be coming on the market, and it's going to be an issue. And the homeowners never know. They don't know what they signed. They don't know if they're leased or if they're owning them. They assume that they're owning them, but if they're leased, then yeah, it's like, well, what does it say? Paid off, do they own them? Or is it, when it's paid off, do they come back and take the solar panels back? I mean, is it like a car? You don't get to keep the car when the car lease is paid off. You got to go give it back. So I don't know. I don't have the answers to that, but it is interesting to discuss and learn more about it. This is going to be an ongoing topic. So next topic I wanted to talk about real quick is subject to purchases. All right. Had listings, you've been approached by investors wanting to do a subject to, and man, we have been inundated on our previous listings with this. And I include in my listing agreement that it's at my discretion whether I give a verbal or an email offer to the seller, right? Because then that eliminates the need to contact the seller every time I get one of these subject twos, because they just come at you. What is a subject to? Can anybody tell me what a subject to purchase is? Anybody want to take a stab at it?
Don't get me started, Paul. I'm going to say, I won't say anything.
Yeah, okay. Jeremy, you're raising your hand? You're
Yeah,
muted.
so
There you go.
our Hunters Creek office basically is our investor division, and I don't ever do them, but from my understanding, it's basically the an investor coming in, they're going to take over the loan essentially, they're not going to change the name to, you know, their name. So it's still in the seller's financing, like their name's still in financing. And then, you know, the caveat to that is the seller cannot go out and buy another property because they're still under that loan. And if the people default, you're kind of screwed. It's really not a good scenario, but it's done a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Martha, you had your hand up. You have something to input? Go ahead, Martha. You gotta unmute yourself.
Like all the sellers strategies like seller financing or maybe rent to own, as Jeremy say, like when they take over subject to like keeping it in a land trust, but it's still they are making the payments for the seller, assigning the contract wholesalers. I guess that is all included.
Well, it's similar. That's a little bit different, but yeah, there's some similarities there with the wholesaling.
Are people still really doing subject to? Because I think isn't the one thing they really want is a low interest rate?
Well, that's part of it. But yeah, you know, look, I don't have any listings right now, but as of late, you know, just a couple months ago, and we still had listings. Yeah, I was getting these subject to offers, and so yeah, I mean, I think that they would prefer the lower interest rate, but look, it even if it's a higher interest rate, they're stealing the home um, by offering what they're offering and eliminating any risk for themselves, really, and putting all the risk on the sellers. So you know, this is something you got to be careful of, uh, and there's a turning disbarred for actually settling some of these subject twos because it gets really cloudy and you need to be careful. Val, you get your hand up? You muted.
My only comment is it's not a crime, but it is a default. And once you get stuck with that default, you're stuck with it. So
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something maybe Brian, you can talk to this, but you know, it could, if you know, if the lender found out about it, they could trigger the due on sale clause, right? You know, and so
Right.
now all of a sudden, you know, we got a problem because they're now calling the loan due. The investors got title, but you owe the money as the seller, and you got to come up with the payment. So, and also if for some reason that investor stops making payment because you know the market changes dramatically and now they look at it as a losing cause, they want to walk away because investors find it real easy to walk away. You know, you're stuck holding the bag, but you know, how do you get it back? Because you know, it's not your mortgage. There might be an agreement in place, but I mean, do you as the seller go to court and do the foreclosure process? Or, you know, do you have to get the bank to do the foreclosure process? In the foreclosure process, then they take it and you might get nothing out of it, but it's going to hurt you. It's not going to hurt the investor. So really, if you're in a situation where you've got a seller that's really thinking about this, you may want to forewarn them. So learn more about it, right? Because you want to make sure that you can help educate people. And this is a great thing to do a video on. You know, a few quick lessons about subject twos. And this is, you know, this is what I know about them. And, you know, here's the potential downfall, Mr. Seller, is that ultimately you're still responsible. And if they don't pay, who knows what direction this thing's going to go in. Um, so yeah, so you need to be really careful. Everything needs to involve an attorney to make sure that you're protected. So, all right. Anything else on the subject twos before we move on? We got the big topic coming up next here. All right. So let's go ahead. We're going to jump into condos. All right. Because, this year, Florida Realtors has introduced some new disclosures and new forms, and some new laws were passed in July having to do with condos in Florida. And we're not going to dive too deep into the laws, because hopefully you've all watched the webinars given by Florida Realtors, and if not, you can probably go into floridarealtors.org and search for those webinars and watch the replay of it, because it's really important, and you'll get to hear it from the Florida Realtor attorney directly. But there's a few things that I want to discuss about condos, because we're going to work with buyers. We might work with some of the sellers, and we're working with a seller right now that's in a condo project, and we have requested everything needed, and the management has not been helpful at all. We've got everything, but I think one document, and Valerie will speak to that in a minute because she's the one been working on it. But the seller, which isn't on the market yet because his unit's being renovated, he's got an attorney on this, and boy, he's sent quite a letter to the office. But Val, why don't you talk a little bit about
I am all over this lawsuit. My name is everywhere. But you know what? The condo association isn't doing what the condo writer is very clear. The new one that came out July 1st. Make sure you're not using the old one. But the July 1st one is now 5 pages long. And you need to make sure you understand it and your sellers or buyers understand it. This is a seller we represent. And it's just a very clear document now. They're trying to take a lot of the mystery out of all the changes that have been made out there. I'm actually looking at it right now. My particular problem is when you get to section 6 of it, it literally lists minutes of condo association board for the last 12 months. It's a very, very helpful document, so that when the condo association says, no, I don't have to supply you with that, you just say, look, it's right here on my form and I need it. The good news is on January 1st, all condo associations are required to have this stuff available on a website. But until January 1st, we're still kind of at their mercy, I guess, as to what we're going to get. But there's at least like 10 things here, and it's just a checklist, to see if you're, you check to see what's requested. Check them all. Trust me, you don't know what you're going to find back there. But the 3 reports that have been important after that building went down in South Florida, the milestone inspection report, the turnover inspection report, and the structural integrity reserve study. So they've actually recently, which is another reason why this form has changed, they kind of the state wobbled on exactly what was required and which buildings qualify for this. They actually made it tighter. So make sure that you go and you read all that stuff. There's places online. I can probably dig them up for you because I've been out there so many times. It's better that you read it from them. But for this one situation, we've got the structural integrity reserve study. Which comes after the milestone inspection. We've got the turnover inspection report is not required because they didn't turn it over in a certain period of time. This is from the 1970s. They turned this over to the owners or whoever has it now quite a while ago. So that's not even required. But the milestone inspection report should have been done last year. And we actually know they have it, but they won't admit to anything. They won't admit they have it. They won't admit any results of it. They won't turn it over. It's just like you ask the question and they keep sending me this structural integrity reserve study. But yet there was one place where they alluded to a date where that milestone inspection report, the 80-page structural integrity reserve study. One of us actually read the thing and saw that the milestone inspection report was done and there's a date. But we're stuck because we're required to turn that over or tell them when it's scheduled for. There's still, because there were only so many inspectors available to do these studies, they've kind of extended the date, but it had to be scheduled before the end of last year. So pretty much all these condos should have this done. But my only advice to you, that's, to be careful. Now we have this 90-page lawsuit that's going through just to get this report and a few other things. There's a few other things in it. But just kind of make sure you understand this condominium rider. It's very clear, especially if you have, a master association and another association. If there's two associations, there's a lot more to deal with. So just be careful, guys. There's listed in the condo rider are the statutes. I've read the statutes. If you have to buy or sell one of these, read the statutes. See what they're supposed to give you. It's just that, because they're now demanding that the reserves increase to cover these older buildings in such an amazing, I'm sure Brian and Jeremy can attest to this. The new reserves might be very, very high and kind of over the value of the condo even. So you just have to be really, really careful. I don't know if I described that very well, but you just have to dig on these things.
Yeah, Valerie's got a lot of time invested in this, and it's not a big unit or anything like that, but the thing is that that's the service we provide to the seller, right? Because we know what is needed. Now we look at other units that are for sale in the same development and that have sold, and there's nothing in attachments with any of this stuff, and we're like, well, how are they selling it without having all of these forms? And I'm sure what they're doing is they're just selling them without the documents. And so, who's going to be in hot water when the time comes? Maybe it's an investor buying with cash and just doesn't care about those reports, right? Or maybe it's a buyer that's buying the unit to live in, or they're just small time investor buying it to rent out. And now all of a sudden, there's going to be special assessments to build up that reserve. And then he's going to be like, well, I just bought the unit. How am I going to pay $30,000, to help build this up? Nobody told me this beforehand. Well, who are they going to come after with their handout when the time comes? The agent. The agent should have known. So it really is our business to do this. And look, you can sell if a buyer and seller agree to whatever terms they want to agree to, they can make the sale. Okay, but if we didn't disclose everything that needs to be disclosed, that's going to affect the value, and that's what all this stuff is about for a condo. Then we're the ones involved in the transaction, so we must be cognizant of what's going on. Now, if a buyer and seller come together at a bar and say, "Hey, I want to sell," and he says, "Oh, I want to buy it," and they write it out on a napkin, that's good enough. I mean, but once you involve us, then we have to make sure that it's all done the right way, and that's why we've got these forms, so that it protects all consumers, buyers and sellers. So, and it also, one of the things that changed in the law too is it gives the buyers now a 7-day cooling off period instead of just a 3-day, which they used to have. So that gives them a little bit more time, okay, to make sure that they can read all the documents, right? Because there's going to be a lot more for a buyer to read if they really want to know what's going on with the community. So, so speaking of the sale of units and what's happening a lot in condominiums, you've got the hedge funds that are buying up units. and why are they paying up condos? And a lot of times condo fees are already pretty high. But why do you think hedge funds are trying to buy up condominiums? Well, and then yeah, Brian, I don't know if you're on the phone or if you can chime in. There you go. One of the things that when a buyer chimes in, wants to buy a condo, the lender is going to send out a condo questionnaire, right, Brian? Okay, and what's one of the main things that they ask for in a condo questionnaire?
The number one question is, have there been or are there current any structural damages that are being repaired?
Mhm.
That's the number one question. We ask for a budget. We ask for the master insurance. We're going to ask if short-term rentals are allowed. Questionnaire is about 30 plus questions, but the number one that they focus on, no matter how much money you put down or anything, is, are there any structural damages and other repairs going on right now?
Yeah, yeah, and so somebody buying a condo, but they're doing financing, you at least you have that as a backup, right? Because the bank is going to make sure that their investment is protected. So they're going to want to see a lot of these documents and make sure that the unit is safe. But what I was looking for was another big question on that questionnaire is, since we're talking about investors, is they ask for a percentage of ownership by investors. And why is that important? If you have a whole bunch of investors in there, you know, who's controlling the
They control
complex
it.
and the association? What was that?
So they control the community at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what the hedge funds are doing. They're buying up units because they want 51% control. Because once they get to that 51%, now they control it. So now they can do whatever they want with the fees and the costs and repairs or no repairs. And what that does is sometimes it puts owners in a position where they got to sell to get out of it. And who's going to be the first buyer in? The hedge fund. They want to control it, everything, and they got bottomless pockets. We're talking Wall Street here. So they have the money, and this is where I am not for government regulation at all, but I think, excuse me, this is where the government needs to step in and say, look, housing is a necessity for people. We can't let Wall Street take control of housing. And that's what they've done. And that's a big part of the inflation on housing is that, with them buying up homes and buying up condos and also setting rents, we've seen everything skyrocket because they come in making these cash purchases with, bottomless pockets. And so it drives up prices. And so that hurts the consumer. Back with all the craziness, I know that when we were working with buyers and putting in offers, we were losing out to the cash offers, which were the investors, the hedge fund investors, and the poor buyers that needed financing were locked out because they couldn't go that far above asking price, and worry about the appraisal and everything else. So these hedge funds are definitely doing it. They can defer repairs. They can force out individual owners. So then they can buy it at a discount. So so you want to, they also, what they do sometimes is they take these condos and now as they get people out, now they convert them back to apartments. If you remember back in the 2000s, Central Florida went through a period where they were taking all the apartments, updating them, making them all condos and selling them out. So now it's kind of reversing in a lot of areas where they're selling, they're buying up these condos. Now they're going to make them, rental units, right? And so that becomes a cash cow for them. And then what they'll do is eventually sell the whole project to somebody else. And then, they've made a whole ton of money. And that's what it comes down to is just how much money can they make in the long run, right? So so you want to be cognizant of this as well when you're seeing, what's going on in a particular complex. Look, they have there's investors that have bought entire housing neighborhoods, right? The builders come in and announce, hey, we got this brand new community coming up, and all of a sudden you see everything's gone because an investor has come in and said, hey, I'll make you a deal, I'll buy the entire place. And what happened is now builders smartened up and they're like, oh, instead of us building and selling to all these investors, there must be something to this. So they're building entire communities that are rental communities, and they're renting them out. So we're talking cash cows here. So they're in the game, right? So you got these big national builders that are renting out units and controlling the market as far as pricing goes. And that's just not good for the consumer. So and the last thing I wanted to touch upon with condos is, when a condo does replacement of a roof, right, there's an elevator and they've got to replace the elevator, and they've got this big expense that they've got to come up with. A roof, especially sometimes, in a high-rise condo, you might be paying $2 million for a new roof, right? And what happens if the contractor skips out before the roof is done? If the manager of the association is not smart enough to make sure that the roofer or anybody else doing, a big project on the complex, they want to make sure that they're bonded, because the bond assures that if something happens to the contractor, the job will get completed. So that way homeowners don't get billed twice for the same work, because that's what happened. If you're paying, you put up $1 million up front, they get started on the roof, and then they bail, and now the roof isn't done, you got to hire somebody else, but you've already assessed all the homeowners a certain dollar amount, and that's money's gone, and now you got to assess them again in order to cover that. So that's where the bond would step in, and you only pay once. And this come up again with the condos situation, in that, they're assessing. One of the things for improving reserves is because there's homeowners that were getting assessed $30,000 bills. They're like, I can't afford to make this payment. I can't go out and get a $30,000 loan so I can pay this. I can't afford the monthly uptick on my condo fees to pay this. So they're left with, I have to sell. And this is again becoming problematic for a lot of buildings. So now it's, let's make sure we've got the budget for any necessary repairs that are coming up. So again, the more you are smart about this when you're working with condos is, you got to get to know the manager. And look, one of the things in the recent laws that changed, I got it here in my notes somewhere. Let me go back and find that, because I skipped over that. Basically, okay, if a manager's license gets revoked, which can happen, right? If they mismanage a complex, their license can get revoked, and then they face a 10-year ban from managing again. So, their livelihood is on the line too. And sometimes maybe what we have to do is remind them of that. Like, hey, look, we need this. You're obligated to get this to the seller, but you're not doing it. You might be the one at risk here. So, keep that in mind too. But it's good to have those conversations with the managers. We're working with a condo, we're calling the management company. We want to find out what's going on. What do we need to know? Can you get us everything that we need? So it requires a little bit more homework, but you know what? I'd rather do that homework up front than wait for a contract and then find there's a serious problem here. So any other questions or comments on that? Anybody run into similar situations? Yeah, Elliot. Yeah, I'm sure, even whether it's in your sales or in your appraisal business, right? You probably run into some of this stuff with condos, and
there was a community down in Orlando. This was back when I was a trainee, so maybe about 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago now, 2018, yeah, about 6 years ago. We were doing a condominium appraisal at a condominium complex, and we were actually doing 22 appraisals for this one company that owned in there. And they still had more than that. They were just doing refinance. Yeah, no, it must have been 2020 or 2021 because they were getting really good rates. So I guess maybe 3 or 4 years. But anyway, so they were refinancing about 20 of their units, but they owned about 72% in this complex. It was pretty wild. It was a pretty big hedge fund, and yeah, they refinanced like 22 of the units. So we did 22 of those units in there. But yeah, that could definitely be an issue, I would think, for traditional financing.
Yeah, yeah. So you guys, if you own condos now, I know, Brian, you have condos, and you need to be alert. If you own any yourself or you're working with people that are buying or selling, pay attention. You got to pay attention to what's going on there, and so that especially if you own there, you don't get left holding the bag. You
Yeah,
know.
on so you're right on note. I've most of the properties I own, when I think about it, it's funny, they're actually condos. And
Hmm.
if some of them are smaller communities where I'll actually have a say on like the budget on what we're doing for the next year. And I will, if we need more funds, I'm actually a proponent of, and I'm definitely the minority here, on doing a special assessment versus increasing our monthly or quarterly HOA, right? Because then what I'm teaching our other homeowners is that you're going to potentially lose value or have a harder time eventually if you want to sell this or even rent it out. Um, and luckily, I've been able to win that argument a couple times. But to your point earlier, Paul, I actually right now I'm doing attempting to do a refinance for a past client that came back to me. He bought a condo. At the time, the condo community, this is in Altamont Springs, they were doing structural repairs on some of the buildings, stairwells to go up to the second and third floor. It's one of those like 3-story condo units. My client's building was not affected. They were not doing the stairwells there. But Fannie and Freddie both said no. There was no conventional loan that was going to do it. So I had to go with one of my, you guys have probably heard me or anyone talk about like the non-QM routes, so just like the non-conventional routes. So we got him in there, but I mean, the rate sucks. It was like 8.7 or 8.9 because of stupid stairwells. I mean, everything else is fine, but that was the only way to get in there. And now, supposedly all the stairwells are done in the entire community. And the HOA doesn't give us a phone number. We're only allowed to email them, which is a whole other thing. And we are trying to show that the stairwells have been done. We're literally down to this last condition, so I can get a clear close and get this guy from an 8.7 down to like a 6.5. I think it's like 300 or 400 a month. We're going to be saving him. But what's holding us up is the HOA needing to provide us some documentation, whether it be certificate of occupancy, inspection reports done, engineer, like just showing that it was completed. And it's like pulling teeth from them. So, anyways, that's just want to bring that up. That's literally something that's going on right now. And I've got to check my emails to see if anything happened over the weekend. But
Maybe
yeah,
there's a
even on a,
closed permit, Brian.
say again.
Maybe you could go to see if they have a closed permit.
That's a good suggestion. Yeah, I'll take a look at it. Thanks, Cindy. But
And I
yeah,
might
that's
condo association.
say again.
I might know that condo association.
Oh, I'll get with you offline and see. I need all the help I can get. But yes, that's
Yeah.
happening right now with one of the condos.
You raised a good point too, Brian, is that, doing a special assessment versus just a monthly increase. And this is something, I mean, the association can actually take out a loan to pay up, if there is a big cost associated with repairs and so forth, they can take out a loan and then assign, monthly payments from each homeowner to that loan, right? So that way it doesn't get added to the monthly typical monthly assessment, but it's just a separate separate line item that, yeah, once it's paid off, it's gone. So that the way the payments don't stay that way. But there's got to be a way too that it makes sense to reestablish the reserves. I mean, they got to have the reserves on hand. And that's part of, you look at just about any condominium association today and you look at monthly fees associated with it. Most of them have ballooned, and I think a lot of it stemmed from 2008 when there were so many foreclosures, and a lot of the condo associations got left holding the bag, and so they've had to pass that along to the homeowners. And so, that's where you start seeing those, $600 a month fees. And it might be that maybe they never dropped, or they're still building their reserves. Because, if you need a couple $1 million in reserves, it's going to take some time to generate that income when you're just pulling in, a little extra money every month. So it's just something you just have to be very much aware and alert, and do your homework to look into these things to make sure that you're not only protecting your buyer and seller, but you're protecting you. I was watching a Daryl Davis webinar, I don't know, last week or the week before. And he was talking about the next round of lawsuits, and he says, look, they're going to be coming after the individual agent more frequently, and a lot stems from everybody using the same listing agreement, okay? Because that's what Florida Realtors has given us, and it's you got a couple choices there, but people are still going to the seller saying, okay, this is what I want to market your property, but you should offer something to the buyer's agent, and we're putting that on the listing agreement. And then while they said it's okay that we can advertise, we just can't put it in the MLS. That really isn't what the DOJ wanted. The DOJ doesn't want the seller offering anything up front. They don't want the buyer's agent calling the listing agent and asking them, well, what are they offering? Okay. They want to give the seller the opportunity to negotiate that in a contract. So be careful. And I know that's one of the reasons why our brokerage does it the way that they do it, because, and they've been complimented on being ahead of the market with all of that. But there's going to be a lot more lawsuits coming. I see it also on Facebook. I see a lot of posts out there, and I mean, it really comes down to antitrust. And if you're not, if you're not cognizant of that, and that's why, if you saw my email that I went out, I mean, there's some people I invited that I see their posts, and I'm like reaching out saying, hey, you might want to jump on here, because not only do we have, an attorney or two that will be coming on in upcoming weeks, but we've got a DBPR investigator. He's retired, but he was formerly an investigator for DBPR. More than willing to come on here and talk to us on a Monday morning and share. And the big thing is marketing and advertising. And if you remember, we had somebody from Freck on here where I approached her personally, and she's like, Paul, you're really better off going to the legal hotline to get those kind of answers, because you know what? I'm not even clear on it. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to clarify and help you to protect yourself when it comes to your marketing and your advertising, because it's so important. It really is. There are people out there watching, and they're just finding people. You can fight it, but it seems silly because they caught you. It's like, how do you fight something like that? So Cindy, you got your hand up. Cindy, you're muted. Nobody heard anything.
Sorry. I
There you
just
go.
wanted to give a shout out to Brian and thank him for the pre-qualification letter. Yeah,
Great.
thank you. There was a couple other mortgage brokers that I already had a discussion with, and they didn't quite understand what I was trying to do and purchase a commercial property. And Brian's like, I'll do it. I'll give you a pre-qualification letter to get your foot in the door. And I thank you for that, Brian. And certainly when it comes to once I'm done with the subject to, then I'll have to refinance. So I'll have to come back to Brian.
Ah, okay. All right. You're making a subject to offer. All right. Good for you.
They have two mortgages, so I've requested to take over both of them and
Uh-huh.
getting a loan from the owner for $100,000. And my daughter's going, if you're over there complaining about getting someone to fix the AC unit, then how are you going to take over a 19-unit apartment building? And I told her it's called opium. Other people's money.
Yeah. Other people's money. Absolutely. That's, look, that's the way to invest. And I talk about that, I talk about Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, and the best quadrant to be in is the I quadrant, the investor. Your money's working for you, you're using other people's money. And so there's nothing better than that. So good luck with that, Cindy. I hope you make that work. All right, we're almost to the top of the hour. Any other questions, comments? We covered a lot of ground today, but it was really, I kind of wanted to make this more about legal issues and because having a fresh conversation with an attorney, I wanted to make sure that it was brought up because it was a lot of information.
I did a successful negotiating this last week, and just thought I'd share. When you get people that start out so low and then they're right up there, and then you get down, just flat out say no.
There we go.
And then you just say they'll take this, and then you say take this and that out of the contract, and then you got a deal, and boom.
There you go. Yeah, look, it's all about negotiating. That's what we do, right? We have to come up with solutions, even though buyers and sellers are doing the negotiating, but we are providing information to them so they can negotiate better. And we give them some direction like that, then that's the stuff we need to do. So kudos to you for getting that done. And if you haven't taken a negotiation class, you should, definitely should. So, guys, I appreciate you all being here. Little disappointed we didn't get the new people on here today, but hopefully I'll reach out to them this week, and we're going to try to build this up a little bit and get some more people showing up each week. Because like I said, I just, between the convention and some of the other things going on this last few weeks, like I got some great ideas for content and some great people that want to come on and speak to you guys. So we'd love to see a little bit bigger audience as we get people to give up their time to come on and help us all out. So, all right, guys, I appreciate it. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you all next week. And Elliot, if you want to hang out for a minute. All right, guys, have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week.
All right. Okay. Stop recording.